Python, Java, JavaScript, C, C++, C Sharp, Rust, R, Go, PHP. The list is endless and it keeps coming out with more program languages every day, it seems like. So which programming language do you choose nowadays? Malolele YouTube, welcome to another episode of Made Mamani Tech. Today we are getting into which programming language should you choose today. Alright, so my quick answer to this is just start coding. Alright, at the end of the day, just pick a language, start coding. That's for my tip for everyone who here doesn't want to stay for the long answer. That's my answer to that question. Which programming language should you choose today? Just pick one and start coding. Because what you'll find is the syntax will be very similar. The style of programming, well, I take that back. Actually, the syntax might be different, but the overall style of coding, like in each programming language, there's similar patterns that you'll see across each language. So like basic variables, for loops, while loops. There might be little syntax changes you might have to take, but the patterns that you use in each programming language, it usually remains the same. Now, obviously there are very different nuances in each language, but the pattern for each programming language when you transition from one to one usually isn't that big of a gap. Now, for the long answer. The long answer to that question, which programming language, if it was me, if I was going back and telling myself which programming language and I wasn't going to school, like I didn't have like a set degree that kind of told me which programming language I have to take, I would honestly pick the career that I'm trying to go down to and ask myself, all right, in this career, which programming languages are essential to this career field, right? So for instance, software development. This one's kind of different because it depends on what area of software development you go into. If you're going into front end, you're probably going to be doing something in like JavaScript, HTML, CSS. They usually call that like the trinity of programming for web development, just from my understanding, right? Again, like this is just, I'm spewing off stuff from my knowledge within the tech industry. So there's like, and then nowadays you hear like TypeScript as well being used there. If you're getting into gaming, like if you're trying to build games, and this is specifically for like PC gaming and like console gaming, at least from my understanding, just when I was, because I've always been interested also in the gaming industry, as it's kind of like mix. It is obviously big into the tech industry, right? And that's kind of where I got started in tech, was through gaming, right? I'm not a big gamer, but like in my early days, like
Trip, you got the classics playing, man.
What you know about the classics, young blood?
I know a lot, man. How did you get Biggie Smalls on the A-track?
that was my first introduction to technology, was through games. So the programming language for gaming would be C++, C Sharp. Those are the programming languages you'll probably primarily be programming in, just from my delving into the field of the gaming industry, right? Now, cybersecurity, what I'm in right now, they use primarily like Python, Go, do a lot of bash scripting. So there's that. And then a lot of legacy programs are built off of like Java. Java is still widely used today. For instance, like Burp Suite is built off of Java, from my understanding, if I remember correctly. And then C is a good programming language for like embedded systems. So there's that. Python and Go is also good for like data science, data analysis, because it's an interpreted language. So you can YouTube that, but just to keep this video short, Python is a very powerful language just because of basic syntax. But again, I wouldn't recommend it for everyone, because like I know everyone recommends Python, and I'll have a separate video just on Python only. But Python is a good language to start off with, but you have to pick it for the right reasons. Like I wouldn't delve into Python if I'm trying to get into the gaming industry, because C++ and C Sharp rule that industry in terms of like game development and all of that, right? So which programming language I would choose today? Long answer is pick your career and then just start coding. Short answer, just start coding in a programming language, just so you can get a feel for it. Because we could talk all day, but at the end of the day, if your hands are on the keyboard typing away, learning the basic syntax, the basics of each programming language, the nuances with different programming languages, you're never gonna start, right? So If I were to go back and choose a language, or well, that was obviously chosen for me through my degree program in computer science, it was Python, right? And I'm so grateful for that Python class. Like I shared last time, that Python class set me up for my future today. And I'm so grateful also because another thing I forgot to mention was like my wife actually helped me solidify my choice of getting into the computer science major, right? Because she actually is she was majoring in computer science before we got married and the pandemic happened. So she would always tell me about like the difficulties she faced, but also the joys of programming that she experienced, right? And Python was her first introduction to coding as well. So within that Python course, I kind of wanted to delve into like what I learned, what you should expect when you pick a programming language. Well, the first thing you're going to learn is the basic syntax. So how do I create a variable? What are the different variables out there? You know, we have a string, you have ints, there's different ints.
What did he say?
So instances of numbers like float, there's doubles. Within each programming language, those are different, but the pattern remains the same. Like you're gonna have these variables, different data types for each variable, right? Also the data structures, learning data structures, algorithms, all of these things are things you want to consider when choosing a programming language, because they're going to be similar in a sense that yes, there is that data structure, but for instance, how you set that data structure will be different across the board, right? Python, way easy just to create what in Python is called a list, but in Java, other programming languages, we call that an array, right? Still has the basic concepts that follow along, the patterns still follow across, but like naming conventions of different data structures is very different, right? You have like your dictionaries in Python, hash maps in Java or C, right? And even in C, like you can't create classes in C, but you can create structs, right? These are all the basics of programming, the fundamentals. Learn the fundamentals, because if you learn the fundamentals of programming, it'll make it easier to understand how these programming languages were even built in the first place and why they're still emerging programming languages, right? Is because each programming language is just building off on top of each other, trying to improve or fix the difficulties that were in one language, right? Some programmers felt like one programming language was missing a feature, so they created their own programming language, added all these features. Hence why C++ is called C++, because it's supposed to add on top of the features that was existing in C. It's also, you know, these are just things I'm kind of just spewing off right now, but it's all information that I've acquired just through college, and it might be wrong. Like my facts might be wrong, but like what I'm trying to say though is go do your research. Go do your research on these programming languages, learn the history. I feel like if you learn the history too, it kind of gives you motivation to like, okay, even though it's difficult, I understand why it's this way, why it's programming is much more strict in languages like Python and C, in Java and C rather than Python. Python's like loosely typed, Java, C, C++, these languages are all like strictly typed. I think that's the word. I'll put the right word right here. Anyways, the main thing is what I'm trying to get at is like, just go pick a language, start coding. Start coding, start making mistakes. Don't get down on yourself if you make mistakes. In programming, you have to make mistakes to learn. When it comes to programming, I like what one of my professors that was teaching me Java said. If you're making mistakes and getting errors, that's good. That you should be proud of yourself, because now you can take it's time to learn. You don't actually learn from like typing on your keyboard and seeing syntax pop up onto the screen. It's when you start making errors in your code, when you start finding what we call bugs. Bugs are just another term for like errors or mistakes within the code, things that halt the code from running or an application running. So all of these things, applications we use today, they're run off of code that software developers and software engineers that are building, right? They build these applications up. So what I work in now, I thought I was going to be a software engineer, and we'll get into career advice later, but I'm just trying to say, like, in terms of programming, in my role as a security analyst, my role is more so I'm building scripts and code to basically essentially emulate like a hacker and trying to steal stuff off of a site that, you know, should be doing proper things, but I'm trying to emulate like what a hacker would do to use coding as a tool to steal stuff from a site, right? A website, Apple phone, Android phone, and computer, laptop. Those are the type of things that I'm working on right now in my job role, full time. But like I said, prior to that, I wanted to get into software development, and I chose Python was like my main programming language that I started out with. But after Python, I got into C. That was the next programming language, which I enjoyed because like with C, you don't have all the, I guess, let's just say it's a lot more complex in terms of working with the computer to get your necessary application running, right? It's not like Python where I can just type print hello world and hit run, and it'll run and print something like hello world across the screen. No, with C, you're diving into the we've always with C, you're always here what's considered low level programming. So you're like really delving into computer memory, how memory is being used to assign variables and things like that. So it's a good way to see like you're not wasting the computer's resources, right? C, you have to really be mindful of what you're doing, which I enjoyed because like I didn't have the flexibility that I had with Python. Python's like real easy to spin up, get application running, but I did realize by doing that, you're being smart and mindful of the resources that you're using within the computer. And then you understand like how a compiler works with like Java and C++, which is what you don't get with Python or JavaScript because those are interpreted languages. All of these concepts, these are the basics and fundamentals of programming language. So like object-oriented programming. And then you have like big O notation, algorithms, setting those things up. So yeah, when it comes to picking a programming language, these are all things you want to consider because it'll help set up a foundation that you can further build upon. And one thing is, once you learn one language, it's pretty easy to pick up other languages. Yes, you're gonna still struggle. There's gonna be some difficulties, but if you like learn one language all the way through, like to the point where like you're building algorithms, and algorithms, for those who don't know, is just a set of instructions that you feed into the computer to accomplish a goal that you're trying to get after, right? So like different algorithms, like that's more deeper level of learning. But if you just learn basics, syntax, variables, data types, data structures, how to create functions and methods within that programming language, if it even is an object-oriented programming language, these are all the things you want to consider when choosing that programming language, right? Again, going back to my short answer, just start coding. Another programming language that I failed to mention, and it's probably because I didn't learn it until later, is kind of when I was delving into mobile development in my CS degree, and that wasn't required. That's something I picked up on my own because we were working on developing an app, a weightlifting application for my senior capstone, right? One of my friends had come up with this great idea, and part of that was us developing like an iOS app. So at that time, I had never coded in Swift, right? Swift is the programming language that's used to develop iOS apps, if you didn't know, right? So like going on to that just adds on to the layer of languages that are out there. There's like mobile development apps that I didn't even get into. So like Swift, Java is used to program Android apps as well. But I think the programming language for Android apps is Kotlin. I'll look that up, but yeah, I think I'm pretty sure it's Kotlin. And it just goes to show there's like more programming languages. I think Dart's another one, but those things I had to pick up. There wasn't a course specifically teaching mobile development, but because I had that foundation of learning how to program in like Python, Java, C++ that I had obtained over the years during my CS degree, it was easier for me to pick up Swift because like the syntax, yes, it was different, but like the basics, the patterns, there was like for loops, object-oriented programming still followed. But I will say Swift is one of those languages. I think Swift comes after Objective-C because I think prior to Swift being available and utilized by Apple, it was Objective-C. But even there, those languages are pretty tough. I will say ranking in terms of the most difficult languages I've learned, programming languages from like easiest to hardest, I would say easiest would be Python, and I use Python on a daily basis. After Python, I learned C and Java after Python, but I would say Java would come like maybe 3 or 4. JavaScript would be second, so Python and JavaScript. HTML and CSS aren't really programming languages; they just go hand in hand with JavaScript, right? So JavaScript very similar in terms of like ease of use, and it runtime and things like that. After that, so Python, JavaScript, I would say Java, then C would be the next difficult language. C++. I actually liked C++ once I like figured it out, but like C++ has some very different syntax than other languages that I've programmed in. And then C#, I would throw those two together, C# and C++. Like again, also my difficulty might be different from others. Others might see this list and like, man, those are all easy languages to learn. But again, I'm not using those languages, so that's the other thing is like the languages you do use, obviously they'll be easier to you because you're always practicing them or utilizing them. The ones you don't utilize obviously will become more difficult because you have to go back and kind of relearn some of the syntax differences, the different nuances between each programming language, right? And then I would add like Swift to the very end of that list too, because like even though I wouldn't even say I picked it up, it was more so I was just like getting my code just to run so our mobile application could work, and then we were able to submit our senior project. So I'll add clips of that here because I was going to come out with video of that, but I just didn't have time because I was like trying to graduate at that time. So yeah, I'll show you guys kind of how the app works and everything, and then what we were able to accomplish. So that was a cool project that I worked on with our team. We actually got picked to be part of our 10-year anniversary for the School of Engineering at USD to present our project. So there's only 2 groups that presented their project, and ours got picked, which was cool because we were just like, everyone's busy in their senior year, so they're just trying to finish up and graduate. But yeah, those are just the simple things that I would give or offer as advice for anyone trying to pick a programming language. Again, this is just to help you guys out. If you are in your tech journey like myself, I think one thing I would add is like all of this stuff, you don't need a CS degree. Yes, you'll hear that a lot. Like you don't need a CS degree to obtain this knowledge. And if you've been following my shorts, you'll notice like I mentioned this in one of my shorts is free code camp. Even with my CS degree, I was still going on YouTube and coding and seeking like knowledge, and that was kind of how my passion for programming came about. Is because like even though I was finishing my homework, I still had like passion afterwards to go up and look and research this knowledge on like programming, how people program, what languages do people utilize in their career fields, right? Their respective career fields. I would go on free code camp and just do like basic searches like SQL. SQL's not, I wouldn't consider SQL a programming language because it's a structured querying language. I don't even know how to say that. Structured query language for like databases. So I had to go on free code camp and learn that. Prior to me taking C and Java, I went on free code camp and just wanted to learn the basics before I even started, just so I wasn't as stressed out when I actually started coding in those programming languages, right? Swift, I had to learn everything through YouTube University. So that's why I'm just kind of sharing my knowledge. You don't have to have a CS degree or CS course to even get into programming language. It's free, and that's what people don't realize sometimes. Like, take advantage of all the free resources that you can before you start dishing out money for these tech resources. Like, I would just hope that our community, if you're trying to get into this, understand that it's free. As long as you're willing to put in the research and practice, you can learn a lot of these things that people pay thousands of dollars for free. So yeah, again, this is just my tech journey. Kind of want to throw this video out there of the next step in terms of my journey, how I started out. After I figured out that I wanted to do computer science, it was programming that I got into. That was my first introduction to tech. So like I said, you don't have to know how to program to get into tech as well. Another good thing about tech is like there's way more things than just programming. Programming is just one of the tools that if you have it on your tool belt, it's good to have. But if not, don't worry. It doesn't mean you can't get into the tech space. Like, there's plenty of opportunities out there and resources. You just have to be willing to do your research and figure out what works best for you, what are you passionate about, and if this is something you actually want to get into. So again, this is my second kind of episode into this my tech journey, but I will continue to add to these videos, and hopefully you guys enjoy, subscribe, and we'll get into it next week. Again, remember, aim high and achieve. Let's go.